Alright, so this one they call exponents. Tristan was using exponents. Can't see that? Now you can. Here Tristan is using the law of exponents. They call this the power rule. What is the power rule of exponents? If you had something like x to the second power to the power of 2, one way of describing that is you can actually distribute here. Another way, sorry, try that again. If I give you x squared to the second power, you could distribute this. That's one way of explaining it. Another way of explaining it is you have how many sets of parentheses here? You have 2. You have 2 of them because it tells you the power of 2. So x squared times x squared. And really that's x times x and x times x. So your answer would be x to the 4th, right? This is a quick example here. Tristan did, this one would be 3 times 4. This is I to the 12th. And then I to the 3rd. And then I to the 4th is 1. And 1 to the 3rd power is 1. I to the 3rd power is negative I from our previous chart. And essentially this is just negative I. So I to the 15th is negative I. So what would I write for Tristan's? You could just say he or she used law of exponents correctly. Kira did something different. Kira, they used a method called dividing. Read for us, Raphael, what Kira wrote.
The exponent of I to the power 15 is 15. When I divide 15 by 4, I have a remainder of 3. I know that I cubed equals negative radical negative 1. So I 15 equals I to the 15th power equals I cubed equals negative
square root.
Square root.
So let me show you guys Kira's method. She takes the 15 and they divide it by 4. 4 goes into 15 how many times? It goes in 3 times with the remainder, what? 3. And then this 3 becomes your I to the 3rd power. And I to the 3rd power is equal to negative I. Remainder. So, Kira's method is basically using the chart. Does that make sense? You just keep adding 4. So 2, 6, 10. This would be I to the 14th. Or 7 plus 4 is 11, and or I to the 15th. So I knew my answer is just going to be negative I. It just continues in the pattern of this one. Okay? Let's do some processing. Let's do some processing before we move on to Libby's. It's not wrong, so let's take a look at it. And this method I just called expand. Everyone say expand? So Libby wrote I to the 15th, 15 i's. And we just learned today, class, that I is equal to what? The square root of negative 1. Well, if I zoom in here, the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1 is just negative 1. And then negative 1 times negative 1 is just a positive. right? Negative times negative is a positive. I'm crossing off. Negative times negative is a positive. So essentially, all Libby has left is the negative 1 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. And we learned today that negative 1 is just written as negative, and the square root of negative 1 is I. So Libby did something that, expanding it, if you had to calculate I to the 99th power, would you guys use Libby's? Not Libby's. Too long. Use whose method? Question. It's a preference. There's no right answer. Raise your hand if you had to calculate I to the 99th power. Raise your hand if Tristan's method makes more sense to you. Raise your hand if Kira's method makes more sense to you. Well, it doesn't matter because we're going to get the same answer.